Is that just too weird? Perhaps. Right, I'm jumping right in where I left off. So I had done profit yesterday, Monday, whenever that was. Firms choosing how much to produce. They produce the quantity where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Long run and short run decisions. If the short run profit is greater than zero, then other firms, in perfect competition, I should say here, this is for perfect competition, and also monopolistic competition. If profits are greater than zero, then if there are no barriers to entry, other firms are going to enter the industry. That's a long run thing because the definition of long run is it's a period of time long enough to change the amount of capital, machines, and buildings. If short run profit is less than zero, then some firms are going to exit the industry in the long run. Takes enough long run being enough time to sell off the machinery, get out of any contracts. Then I already talked about this, what they do in the short run. Didn't I talk about this? I did. I did the whole thing about the discussion around the table and so on. All right, I already did this slide. Free entry drives profit to zero, so you should be able to draw this graph. So let's see. Stuff in dollars on the vertical, quantity for the market. Sorry, yeah, well, prices. Prices on the vertical for the market, which are measured in dollars. Quantity on the horizontal. Bunches of stuff measured in dollars for the firm on the vertical, quantity on the horizontal for the firm. Initial downward sloping demand, D1. Initial upward sloping supply, S1. Gives us some initial price, P1, which determines the marginal revenue for the firm. It's a perfectly competitive industry, so it's a horizontal marginal revenue curve, marginal cost curve on there. And let's have the firm start. Whoopsie, well, I'll make it nice and thick. There. Have the firm start with zero economic profit, so my ATC is going to hit its minimum right at that common intersection point, and the individual firms are producing quantity Q1. Collectively, all the firms are producing uppercase quantity uppercase Q1. Now, suppose that something happens. Now, the easy one, I'm going to draw and erase, okay? The easy one to do is to shift the demand curve to the right, and that's often the story we've had. So suppose that something happens, increases the demand for the product. There's a variety of events that I make up. Shift the demand curve to the right. The demand for the product increases. That pushes up the price, leads to a new equilibrium price, P2. At that new equilibrium price, the typical firm is going to increase the quantity that it's producing from Q1 to Q2. Typical firm is now earning profit because the price is greater than because the price is greater than the average total cost. Because the firms are earning profit, this was the short run, or what I'm going to call in the next slide or two, the transition. Because the firms are earning profit, other firms are going to enter. As other firms enter, that increase in the quantity of firms shifts the supply curve to the right. Shifting the supply curve to the right moves the price back down, and firms will continue to enter until the price goes back down to its original price. So the typical firm is once again producing where it was initially. But there are more firms, which is why the market quantity has gone up from Q1 to, I didn't mark Q2, to Q3. All right, are we good on that one? That's the straightforward, that's the easier one. All right, I don't have an extra set of slides, so I'm going to erase all the red, I think. So you've seen this a gazillion times. Here it goes. Let me see if I can erase just the red. That's too much trouble. Erase all. All right. So now let's see what happens if we have the more complicated example, which is the change in costs. So again, prices on the vertical, market quantity on the horizontal for the market, bunches of stuff measured in dollars. On the vertical, quantity for the firm. The price, of course, is one of those things measured in dollars. Start out standard demand, D1, supply, S1, gives us a market equilibrium price, P1, dash it over, P1 determines the marginal revenue, MR1, throw in there a marginal cost curve, MC1. Start out at long-run competitive equilibrium, which means the average total cost curve is hitting its minimum, right where those other intersections are. Market quantity, uppercase Q, firm's quantity, lowercase q. So that's just our starting point. All right, now suppose the story is that there's some increase in costs. If there's an increase in the fixed costs, so there was one example on an old midterm, I forget what the example was, it was like insurance or something went up. But if it's an increase in fixed costs that are faced by the firm, the fixed costs have no effect on the marginal cost curve, because the marginal cost curve is measuring the change in costs as you produce additional quantities, and fixed costs, because they are fixed, don't change as you increase the quantity. And so an increase in fixed costs is not going to shift up the marginal cost curve. But an increase in fixed costs does shift up the average total cost curve. So if the scenario is, where am I going to write this? Over here. If it's an increase in fixed costs, we're going to show that as a shift up of the average total cost curve. And that's the beginning point of the story. So, for instance, I think insurance was one that was on an old midterm. Opportunity cost is another one. So there was an old midterm question about why, once the economy picked up, a lot of small businesses would close. Well, the opportunity cost is the income that you can earn, the opportunity cost of your time is the income you could earn if instead of running your own business, you were working with somebody else. If you go from being unemployed, where your alternative income is zero because you can't find a job, to being able to find a job that pays you, say, $60,000 or $70,000 a year, then the opportunity cost of your time has just jumped up a whole lot. That's going to show as an increase in fixed costs, which we would show here as an increase in the average total cost curve. So that's another example that would be shown as a shift up of the ATC curve with nothing else at the very beginning of our story. Ink color red. So if I shift up the ATC curve, ATC2, then at the existing price P1 and quantity produced Q1, is the minimum, the firm is now earning negative profit, that is, they have losses. And so there will be firms that leave the industry, and firms will continue to leave the industry until the price has risen to the point that those firms that remain are now earning zero economic profit. So that's how we would show something that's due to an increase in fixed costs. If instead the story was something that increased the variable cost of production, if we're increasing the variable cost of production, then we're going to shift up both the marginal cost and the average total cost curves. So let me erase just these pieces. Here. Okay. So if, wait a minute, I got to erase one more thing. Erase. Thump. Okay. So if there's some story that's increasing the variable cost of production, then we're going to get a shift up of the marginal cost curve and a shift up of the average total cost curve. Remember that your ATC is still going to hit its minimum as it crosses the marginal cost curve. So I'm going to draw a second, pretend these are parallel. A second marginal cost curve, MC2. I'm going to shift up my average total cost curve as well. So there's my, I already have it labeled, ATC2. The typical firm, yes, okay. The typical firm is now going to produce a lower quantity because they're going to produce where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, which is now at that lower quantity Q2. And so as a result of the increase in cost, because all of the existing firms are now producing less, we're going to have a shift to the left, or looks like a shift up, of the supply curve. At every price, there's now a lower quantity produced because the higher costs have meant that the profit maximizing quantity Q2 is now less than what was profit maximizing before. So when we did supply and demand, we talked about an increase in input costs. An increase in input costs would be shown as a shift, as a decrease in supply. That's what we just did here. So an increase in input costs, because it's increasing marginal costs, is going to lead to a decrease in the quantity that the typical firm produces, and that's why the supply curve on the market shifted to the left. Is that good? What we're going to get then is a new price, P2, in the market. So all the individual firms are now producing less. Collectively, there's a lot less produced. That's going to push up the price. We're going to bring the price back over, P2. Because the demand curve is downward sloping instead of vertical, because we don't have a vertical demand curve, the price is going to go up, but it's not going to go up by the full amount of the increase in costs. And so the new price P2 is going to come someplace in the middle between the old price P1 and the new minimum of that ATC curve. So you got a new price P2, you dash it over, gives us a new marginal revenue, MR2. Because the price has risen, the typical firm is now going to produce a slightly higher quantity. I'll call it Q3. So they're getting a higher price, and so they're going to be willing to produce a little bit more Q3. They're still not at Q1. And now at that quantity Q3, we still have losses because the price is still below the average total cost. All of that's the short run story. All of those pieces are the short run. So the short run, the costs go up, it shifts up the marginal cost curve. That's why the supply curve shifts to the left. That raises the price, but the price doesn't rise by the full amount of the increase in cost. And therefore, the typical firm is going to be producing Q3 a smaller quantity, Q3, than they were initially, more than they would have if the price hadn't risen. But Q3 is less than Q1. But is now incurring losses because the price has not gone up by the full amount of the increase in cost. Now we get the long run part. Because the typical firms are now incurring losses, we're now going to get some firms leaving the market. Change colors again. Somebody asked me not to use red green. And so now the supply curve is going to shift to the left again, S3, because of the decrease in the number of firms in the market. Firms are going to leave the market, and the price is going to rise until we hit price P3. If you need to squiggle a little bit to make this work or make your line fat, do it. We're going to move up to price P3, where price P3 hits the minimum of the average total cost curve. So MR3, which corresponds to price P3, and we're back. And so for the typical firm that survives this process is back producing its original quantity, but selling it at a higher price. There are fewer firms in the market. So in the long run, the full increase in cost is passed on to the consumer. We saw this with taxes. So the tax that the consumer has to pay in the short run, it drives the price up a little bit, but the typical firm is now incurring losses, so some firms leave the market, and firms will continue to leave the market until the price rises sufficiently so that consumers are paying the full amount of the tax. The stuff about who bears the burden of the tax and whether the consumer bears the larger or the smaller burden of the tax and how that depends upon elasticity, all of that's about short run. Yep. So that just the ATC shifting was on the top left over there. So if it's just an increase in fixed costs, see the very, very, very top of the slide? Yeah. So if it's just a change in fixed costs, that's going to shift your average total cost curve because fixed costs are part of your total cost. But marginal cost is the additional cost of producing each additional unit. Since the fixed costs don't change as you produce each additional unit, they don't affect your marginal cost curve. Your marginal cost curves are the change in your variable cost. And so if it's just a change in your fixed cost, it's going to shift up the ATC, have no effect on your MC. If it's a change in any other kind of cost, it's going to shift them both up. Does that help? When MC2 equals MR2, so here, let me make the lines thick. Maybe that'll help. So here's MC2, here's MR2, and those things are going to intersect right here. Yeah, and I dropped it down and I labeled it quantity Q3. You can call it quantity Q banana. I don't care what you call it. You can call it whatever you want. It's the third quantity in my story because the first quantity in my story determined how far to the left the supply curve shifted. Yeah, yep. Now what we're going to get is people are going to label some curves on their final Q banana, and the GSIs are going to say, they must have been sitting next to each other because I got like 3 people who labeled it Q banana. What's that about? So remind me to mention this in the GSI meeting. Yes, okay. All right. Any other questions on this? Yeah. So the price P2 falls in between P1 and P3 because the demand curve is downward sloping. So if the demand curve were vertical, if it was a vertical demand curve, then when the supply curve shifts to the left, the entire increase in cost would get passed on to consumers right away. But because the demand curve is downward sloping and not perfectly vertical, then the increase in cost is going to be shared, not equally, but it's going to be shared between the buyers and the sellers. Yeah. Marginal revenue goes up the second time. So the jump to MR3 is because of the disappearance of firms. The jump to MR2 is because the higher cost of production led to a decrease in the quantity of output that firms were willing to produce. And so at the old price, there's now excess demand for the product, which puts upward pressure on the prices. So MR1 to MR2 is because the higher costs lead to a decrease in quantity supplied, which makes prices go up. MR2 to MR3 is because of the disappearance of firms. Even better, MR1 to MR2 is the increase in cost, MR2 to MR3 is the decrease in firms. Is that better? That's about as concise as I can do it. Coke. Yes, that's right. MR1 to MR2 is short run, MR2 to MR3 is long run. Sure. Yeah, by the time your GSI looks at it, they don't know which curve you shifted first, right? So the question is okay if I draw it by first shifting the supply curve and then shifting the supply curve? Supply curve and then the MC curve. We look at the end result. We don't get to actually watch you draw it. So it's a very, or we could, we could like have drones on top and watch everybody then go back and like have film that we watch. Yeah, over here on the side. When only the ATC shifted, we didn't have the shift of the marginal cost curve. So when we had just the ATC shift, which was the previous one, when just the ATC shifted, then the next step is a second supply curve because firms leave the industry, which pushes up prices. Yes, yeah, in the pink. Shh. Yeah, because Moon is here, and she's going to make sure that I edit it and make sure I specify short run or long run. Because she gets to edit what I write and looks for these, like, did she say short run when she meant short run? Thank you for reminding me. Other questions? Yeah. Yes. If there's an increase in fixed costs, it's always going to be the case because it's just a mathematical thing that the ATC curve is going to hit its minimum as it crosses the marginal cost curve. So if the ATC shifts, you're still going to have the minimum of the ATC where it crosses MC. So the quantity, if it's just a change in fixed costs, the quantity where ATC hits its minimum is going to change. Yeah. Way in the back. In the long run, it's going to be born, in perfect competition, it's going to be born entirely by the consumer. In the short run, it's going to depend upon the elasticity of demand. So if there's relatively elastic demand, the increase in costs are going to get borne by the seller. If there's relatively inelastic, pretty vertical demand, the increase in costs are going to get borne disproportionately by the buyer. So the exact same analysis you would have had for a tax is a cost. So it's the same analysis, you're just swapping out the word tax for cost. Okay. All right, let's see. Then we talked about distribution of income. We had a concept of Gini coefficient. We had a lot of data. I don't have all that data to show you. You're looking at it anyway for the essay, and so I'm just going to skip over that slide. It's there. Then we talked about market failure. We saw that if any of these assumptions isn't satisfied, perfect competition, profit max, utility max, private property rights, full information. If any of those 5 is not satisfied, then economists say that markets fail, not in the sense that markets seize up and cease to exist, but in the sense that they don't produce the quantity where price equals marginal cost. We looked at several cases of market failure. The first one we looked at was monopoly. In monopoly, there's one firm. Nobody produces a close substitute to what that firm produces. There's some sort of a barrier to entry that prevents other firms from entering the industry. Examples include patents, government franchises, ownership of scarce resources, economies of scale, or illegal means of keeping people out. Yet again, the profit maximization rule, because it's dropping out of the calculus, which you get to see in 100A, the profit maximization rule is produce the quantity where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. With monopoly, they can have long-run profit greater than zero because there is no entry possible. There are no firms that are entering to compete away those profits. So the monopoly picture, bunches of stuff measured in dollars on the vertical, quantity on the horizontal. We had some downward sloping demand curve, D1. Have downward sloping marginal revenue curve, MR1. The marginal revenue curve has twice the slope of the demand curve. That's something that we can show you in office hours. It again comes from the calculus. You just need to trust it. By having it twice the slope, it means that it's bisecting the distance between the vertical axis and the demand curve. Marginal revenue curve is different than the demand curve because this is, by assumption, this is a single priced monopolist. With a single priced monopolist, the marginal revenue is what's the additional revenue from selling one more unit. In perfect competition, that was horizontal because the firm, every time they sold one more unit, they weren't having to change the price. And so the additional revenue they were getting was the price that they were selling those things at. And so the marginal revenue was just equal to the price. With a single price monopolist, if the monopolist is going to sell one more unit, in order to sell one more unit, because we're assuming single price, I've said that phrase like 7 times now because it's really important. Because we're assuming a single price, the monopolist needs to lower the price in order to increase the quantity that they're going to be able to sell. And so, yeah, they're selling more quantity, but everything they're selling is at a lower price. And so their revenue doesn't go up by the full amount of the price that they're charging for the good. And that's why the marginal revenue at any quantity is lower than the demand curve. Throw a marginal cost curve on here, and that gives us the intersection of marginal cost and marginal revenue. From that quantity dash up until you hit the demand curve, that tells you the price that they will charge for that product. And then again, because this is monopoly and there are barriers to entry, this monopolist can be earning profit in the long run, which means that we can have a cost curve that comes down below the demand curve. As always, it's going to hit its minimum when it crosses the marginal cost curve. And so in this case, I've got a monopolist who's earning profit equal to the area of that rectangle, that shaded in rectangle. Monopolies are pretty rare. What's much more common is monopolistic competition. So doing the analysis of monopoly is really a teaching tool to get us to the point of talking about what's much more common in our lives, which is monopolistic competition. In an industry characterized by monopolistic competition, there are lots and lots of firms. There are no barriers to entry, but the distinction from perfect competition, each of the firms is producing a slightly different product. So we say there's a heterogeneous output or heterogeneous product. So my coffee tastes better and is in a different cup than the coffee that some of you bought at Starbucks. Just saying. Always amazes me. I still get like gift cards from Starbucks from people. It's like, did you ever listen to my examples about coffee? Pete's. Anyway, so same picture. Picture looks the same. Tends to have a flatter demand curve than just your standard monopoly because there are lots of firms and there's some substitution. So yeah, there's some people who will just buy whatever's the cheapest coffee, and then there's people like me who only buy Pete's. So downward sloping demand. I have no idea why that did that little circle there. There we go. Marginal revenue curve, marginal cost curve, Q1, P1. In monopolistic competition, if the firm is initially earning abnormal profit, that is, if initially the cost curve is dipping down below the demand curve, so they're earning some profit, so the price is greater than average total cost, because there are no barriers to entry, others will enter the industry. So, we see this all the time, right? So, frozen yogurt, there used to be just Yogurt Park, and now there's frozen yogurt every 17 feet. Coffee, there used to be just a small number of coffee shops near campus, and now there's a ton of coffee shops near campus. I don't know, what's your favorite kind of food on campus? These are all near campus, all monopolistic competition. So, somebody makes a little bit of profit, everybody says, oh, I can do that too. And so, in the long run, what's going to happen is when other firms enter, other coffee shops open, that competes away some business from the existing coffee shops. And that takes and shifts the demand curve for that first shop to the left. So, it decreases the demand. The long run result is going to look like this. The average total cost curve is going to come down. It's going to just be tangent to the demand curve at that profit maximizing point. Continue down until it hits its minimum when it crosses the marginal cost curve. Draw a big dot, so it looks like that's a tangency. And so in the long run, the typical firm in the monopolistically competitive industry is going to be making zero economic profit, at which point there's no incentive for others to enter the industry and compete away some of their customers. There's no incentive for firms to leave the industry and share their old customers with the remaining people. It's dang near impossible to draw the graph where you start and then you start. It's very, very, let's say impossible. To start with the graph. Here, let me show you. I couldn't have done this. Let me erase this thing. If I had started out by drawing an average total cost curve like this and said, oh, look, here's a firm that's earning profit, and because they're earning profit, other firms are going to enter the industry, that's going to shift the demand curve to the left, which of course shifts the marginal revenue curve to the left. It's pretty much impossible for you to draw this and now draw a new demand curve with a new marginal revenue curve, all of which is drawn the way it's supposed to be drawn so that you wind up at the long run competitive equilibrium. So you never saw us do that. You never saw us start with this picture and then shift the demand curve in a picture that already had the average total cost curve there and wind up at that long run competitive equilibrium, because it's just really, really hard because there's 3 lines. There's actually 4, right? Demand, marginal revenue, marginal cost, and ATC. It's really hard to get all of them to line up exactly. So that's why you always saw us start by drawing the long run competitive equilibrium, or drawing this and then on a wholly separate slide, drawing this is what it's going to look like. There's going to be a shift in the demand curve and they're going to wind up at a new equilibrium. So if you find that it's really hard to start with this picture and then draw a new demand 2 and MR2 where everything winds up at zero profit, you're right. It's really, really hard to do. You've never seen me do it. You've never seen your GSIs do it because it's too hard. All right, comparing the industry forms. So this is a chart that I came up with on the spur of the moment in office hours one day, and people liked it, so I tweeted it out as a photograph. Here it is. So summarizing